Well, tonight, the scripture lesson I've chosen for our topic this evening is from Mark chapter 10, verses 13 through 16. People were bringing little children to him in order that he might touch them, and the disciples spoke sternly to them. But when Jesus saw this, he was indignant and said to them, "Let the little children come to me. Do not stop them, for it is to such as these that the kingdom of God belongs. Truly I tell you, whoever does not receive the kingdom of God as a little child will never enter it." And he took them up in his arms, laid his hands on them, and blessed them. Blessed are those who hear the word of our Lord and believe. Tonight we're going to talk about something we've seen in the news, and we're probably just about sick of it and about tired of it. So hopefully tonight we can take this whole Jerry Sandusky sex scandal, and I'm specifically calling it, I think I've spelled Jerry wrong, I think it should be a G, but specifically calling Sandusky sex scandal because a lot of time in the press it's been called the Penn State sex scandal. And it's not the Penn State sex scandal, but it is. It is and it's not. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that. But to give you a little idea of who is Jerry Sandusky, most, if you're involved in sports at all, or you like sports at all, or Penn State football, you certainly know who Jerry Sandusky was. Jerry Sandusky is a retired football coach, and he's also a convicted serial child molester. He served as an assistant coach for almost his entire career. And he's one of the most notable major college football coaches who never held a head coaching position. He was assistant coach and defensive coordinator under Joe Paterno from 1969 to 1999. And he also received the Assistant Coach of the Year awards in 1986 and in 1999. He's written several books related to his coaching experiences. And in 1977, Sandusky founded what was called the Second Mile. And it was a nonprofit charity serving Pennsylvania's underprivileged and at-risk youth. He eventually retired as assistant coach at Penn State, and he continued working with the Second Mile. And it was at Penn State and on their campus was where he worked with the Second Mile kids. And he also maintained an office at Penn State up until 2011. He met most of his victims through the Second Mile, and several of those who met Sandusky as children participated in that organization and testified against him at his trial. Finally, in 2011, following a two-year grand jury investigation, Sandusky was in fact arrested. He was charged originally with 52 counts of sexual abuse of young boys over a 15-year period. That's really important. 15 years this went on. 4 of the charges were subsequently dropped, leaving 48 counts remaining. And of those 48, he was found guilty on 45 of the charges. Now, he hasn't been sentenced yet, but they are expecting that he'll spend the rest of his life in jail. One of his sons have come forward saying that he was also sexually abused. And there's probably going to be more coming forward. But at this point, it's pretty a moot. It's even if they could, but it's a moot point. He's going to be spending the rest of his life in jail. I mean, he's not going to get out, and he's been convicted. And unless he appeals it, possibly during the appeal, some of these new charges may come up, but doubtful. So, anyway, this tragedy that occurred over a 15-year period is far more reaching than what we sometimes see on the surface. Because not only are the victims and their families horrifically affected, but also, as we know and we saw in the news, Coach Paterno, Athletic Director Tim Curley, Vice President Gary Schultz, President Graham Spanier, and even Dottie Sandusky have been or may be implicated in knowing about or even covering up the abuse. So we have Joe Paterno, Graham Spaniard, Jerry Sandusky. We have McCreary, who was assistant or quarterback coach, who actually reported the shower incident. We have this is athletic director. The athletic director was Tim Curley, And this is Vice President Gary Schultz. Here's Dottie Sandusky. And then here's, of course, Jerry Sandusky again in his prison garb. And then, of course, the statue of Joe Paterno, which has been taken down. And I put that particular slide up because it shows what happened to the university and what happened to the football program. They got stripped of some of their wins. Paterno himself got stripped of his wins. The NCAA came down on him, and the whole bit. So the football program, the college football as a whole, I mean, the whole NCAA has gotten a lot of flack over their sanctions against Penn State, some for and some against, some that they didn't go far enough, some that they went too far. The students, the players. Now, thankfully, the NCAA did protect some of the players and said, the players who are on the team this year can transfer to other schools with no penalties. Because normally if you transfer in mid-season, you have to sit out a year. Well, they don't have to. They can actually start playing this fall. And some of the Penn State football players have, in fact, left and gone to other schools. Penn State and its fans. And then eventually the taxpayer. Because guess what? Penn State is a state college. Now, not only does it get revenues from the football program, but it also gets revenues from us. So the tuition increases, as parents are going to have to pay the tuition increases, because of course, a lot of the Pell Grants are going away. Scholarships are all going. A lot of those are going away because of these sanctions. And then what about the lawsuits, and the penalties that are coming down from all this? So this thing is really far-reaching. One man has literally not only destroyed the reputation of a college and many other people, but they themselves have destroyed themselves through their own issues. And we're going to talk about how this all has happened. And one of the things that I think really disturbs me the most is that, as more and more comes out about what Joe Paterno did or did not know, what Spaniard did or did not know, same way with Schultz and Curley, that's all going to go to trial eventually. Now, Joe Paterno will never go to trial. He died. But his family is going to keep fighting to clear his name. Curley and Schultz, they're going to go to trial because they are being accused of covering up the abuse. And the whole reason, one of the main reasons that the NCAA put down these sanctions against Penn State was because of the culture of football. The culture of football took over common sense, took over safety of the kids. So if the allegations are true, that these guys all covered this stuff up and didn't say anything, with the exception of McCreary, and even that I'm a little, again, I'm not sure he went far enough. But then we can all sit back and do the right, and they accused Paterno of not doing enough. And it's very easy to sit here and say, to what is it, Monday night or Monday morning quarterback. We can all sit here and say, oh, well, I would have done that differently. Or I would have done. Well, we don't know what we would have done if we're in the position that they were in. Hopefully, we would not have repeated the same things. Yes. He worked under, right, you're right. Right, Sandusky worked under Paterno for 30 years. I mean, you certainly would have a friendship and a close bond with somebody like that. And it would be very hard to turn somebody like that over to the authorities, I would think. I mean, I would probably have a hard time believing that my friend would do this. Yeah. If you look at the chronology, and it's easy. You can just go on the web, go on the internet. You can actually look at the chronology of all these charges. What was said here, what Kirby is getting at is that Joe Paterno, it is known that Joe Paterno forced Sandusky out. He forced him to resign, to retire, basically, because of all these allegations that came up and all this investigation. He did not want the reputation of the football program to be tarnished. But even back in '99, other than forcing him to retire, there are some who said, and there are some out there, and this is where it really gets sticky. There are some who say that the president never could have overruled Paterno because Paterno has too much power. If Paterno said, "Do it," that's what was done. Now, right, where is the truth in that? Where is that line that Spanier and yes, right, and so you have to wonder, where the authority was, Correct. And that is a big point. Where did it? But you're right. Children and Youth, Governor Corbett, who was then Attorney General Corbett, investigated this. And, of course, he's come under really heavy flack over this because he didn't do anything. Right. Rather than a grand jury, they could have gone ahead and arrested him immediately and didn't have to go through a grand jury investigation. Yeah, so even Corbett, I should have had a picture of Corbett up here because Corbett has gotten a lot of flack over this. And personally, I think he's just as culpable in much of this as well. He's the Attorney General. He could have stopped this immediately. He could have arrested him immediately. But, his out is that, an investigation takes a long time to get all of the, corroborating evidence, to get everything together, and so on and so forth. So this really became an absolute chaos. And then, of course, Children and Youth investigate. But here's the thing. Because it was never brought into public eye, because he was never arrested, it wasn't until the grand jury investigation became public that most of these other boys came forward. When they found out that they weren't the only ones. Exactly. Had they locked him up and had it become public, when Corbett was Attorney General, this would have come to light a lot sooner, and the kids would have probably come forward a lot sooner. But the problem was Corbett claims, well, we didn't know how many were out there. Well, once the kids found out that they were not by themselves, they all came forward and started talking. And they all started, doing that, knowing they'd have to testify. And none of the kids came forward. You're right. And once you bring them to trial, double jeopardy does not allow you to retry them again. The problem is that if you have a child molester who is acquitted, the other victims don't want to come forward because he got off it once. He's going to get off it again, because they then believe it's a conspiracy. So you see how convoluted this thing can get, and how it literally becomes, okay, did he really do it? Is he doing it? Are there other kids out there? Can we arrest him? Can we convict him? Can we get the people to come forward? Will they testify? All this stuff is going on. And the reason I know about it, my father was a public defender for 17 years. So, I've had extensive discussions with him about, why would Corbett not make the arrest? Why would, what would go on? And my father said, he goes, I'd have a field day with him. Here's why. And here's, if they did, depending on the evidence and so on and so forth. So it is. But you're right. If it would have become in the public, but it was a gamble. And it was a gamble that Corbett wasn't ready to take because, why? And here's the thing that really, bingo, he was running for governor. So now political aspirations, they fry Paterno, saying that the reputation of the school was more important than that. For Corbett, it was his governor's race was more important than getting these kids taken care of. That's just as bad, yes. He was, yeah. As governor, he is, no. Right, no, she was saying before that. No. He wasn't on the board. As governor. Okay. That I'm not aware of. But yes, as a governor, he's an ex officio member. He had some sort of connection. Yeah. So, this all becomes extremely convoluted. So it's very easy for us to sit back, and this is why I wanted to have tonight, because they literally have crucified Sandusky or crucified Paterno, but very little has been said about Corbett, and yet he's just as responsible as Schultz, Curley, or Spanier. And it still hasn't been brought out what they knew. The other thing I'm waiting for, and I don't know if they'll do this, I don't think they will, but what I'm waiting for is them to bring charges against Dottie. I don't think they will, but, the question remains, how much did she know? Do you live with somebody and you don't know anything about it? And there's a lot of people who can live double lives and their loved ones know nothing about it. But with everything going on, and especially with the kid who claimed that he yelled for help in the basement, that becomes an issue. But, as you can see, this really was far-reaching. I mean, this affected a lot of people. But the thing that really upset me, not only about Corbett, but what happened after the NCAA sanctions? What happened after the NCAA sanctions? What did the players and the school do? They threw a pep rally. They threw a pep rally to say how important football is to Penn State and how important football is to Penn State and how we're gonna triumph over these NCAA sanctions, and it's like they never heard what the whole issue that the NCAA was trying to get across to them is the culture of the football has taken precedence over safety of the kids. And what about not only is football more important than the academics of the college? Again, I understand why they did it, and I can understand school spirit, and I can understand loyalty, and that's great. And I can understand trying to get everybody kind of pumped up, after getting hit with these horrible sanctions. But at the same time, it was the culture of the football. If, in fact, this is true, and the culture of the football took over and was more important than the safety of these kids, then we shouldn't be doing pep rallies to try to, rah, 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 football, rah, 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 football. Instead, we ought to say, let's do something for these kids. What can we do for these kids? And fortunately, there's a lot of organizations on the Penn State campus that are, in fact, doing a lot for the kids. But I would have loved to see the football program itself say, we weren't a part of it. And that's what these players are basically saying. We weren't a part of it, but because our coaching staff was and our school was, we accept these sanctions and we want to do something memorable to support these kids. So, but that wasn't done. It was, what can we do for the football program? But ultimately what it comes down to is, how do we protect our kids? How do we protect our kids? Because what we found out was, and some of the several things that were brought to the forefront of this whole issue, was that a pedophile can look like the guy next door or the girl next door. We have female school teachers who are having sexual relationships with their male counterparts. We have male school teachers who are having sexual relations with their female counterparts. We have bullying going on in schools over, not only over the whole LGBT issue, but also over things such as your ethnicity. If you're Muslim, you have people getting, skinny, fat, whatever, are being bullied. What we found out also is that ministers and priests, we look at what's going on with some of the charismatic ministers. We saw some of those being, and of course, arrested because of pedophilia, or because of, or that not arrested. Some of them were disgraced because of their extracurricular activities outside of their marriage. We've also had priests who were abusing children. We have charity workers such as Sandusky and such, but also clowns. One of the most horrible. I can't remember his name. There you go, Gacy. Yeah, Gacy was a clown for children's birthday parties and was killing the kids, or molesting and killing the kids. So, this is really. We had it. We saw it at Allentown School District, where we had an older child molest younger kids at the Allentown School District. Absolutely, but it is illegal to molest anybody. But believe it or not, if children of within 5 years of each other are experimenting, that's not illegal, as long as it's consensual between the two kids. It's not consensual, then it's illegal. And that's what happened at the Allentown School District. But we see most of the pedophiles are adults on children. And our children are at risk, no matter whether it be another child, and especially in bullying, it is other kids usually. It's usually other kids bullying, not parents. They're not adults bullying kids, it's kids bullying kids. And that's just, so how do we protect our kids? What do we do to make sure that our kids are not physically, emotionally, mentally, or sexually abused? Well, when it comes to what they have found, or what everyone agree on, is that education is the key to this. One of the worst things that can happen is the fact that nobody knows about what's going on, and that's what happened here. Nobody knew what was going on, or if those who did know weren't reporting it. So not reporting known or even suspected abuse is just as bad as the abuse itself. And that's what we found here. Was not only was the abuse horrific, but we found out how much of the cover-up or supposed people who knew about this and didn't say anything, or knew about certain incidents and never said a word, never took it beyond the internal workings of Penn State. So most experts agree that the key is, in fact, education. Teaching kids what abuse is. That's number one. Making sure the child themselves understand the difference between fighting and joking around, as well as normal sexual interest, and what is truly abuse. What is bullying? What is physical violence? What is normal sexual interest, and what is forced abuse? What's the difference between punishment and abuse? The difference between being backhand to the face compared to a timeout. Corporal punishment has seemed to most of us have grown up in the days where we still got a belt to the butt. Most of us still remember those days where parents spanked. That pretty much has gone by the wayside for the most part, but you still see parents losing it in the middle of a grocery store and just hauling off and whap some kid. And it's okay, well, was that a spank or was that abuse? Again, it comes down to the child understanding what is the difference between a punishment and violence. And if mom and dad, here's the other thing, if mom and dad punish behavior, with violence, then what does that tell the kid? It's okay. So if somebody hurts them, what are they going to do? Absolutely. When you punish somebody, when mom and dad punish me, I get hurt. So when someone does something that upsets me or makes me mad, then I can use violence because they hurt me. So I'm going to hurt them back. And so it just perpetuates this. So when the kids understand the difference between punishment and abuse, they understand between normal sexual interest and what is truly abuse, then again, education's key. Goes back to kids being taught to report incidences or suspicious or threatening instances regarding themselves or even their friends. Coming back and letting mom and dad know, hey, I was over at Brian's house and his father just wailed on him. He's got a black eye, he's got a bloody nose, and his dad came in drunk and just, beat the living right out of him. Letting kids know that they need to come back and tell a parent. They need to come back and say somebody. They need to report it to either a teacher, a principal, or a guidance counselor. Not reporting the suspicious activity is wrong. I know of an incident in the church where nobody had any hard facts. But the person just gave everybody the willies. The person just, it was like something is not right with this person. And everybody felt a little uncomfortable, especially if that person showed affection toward children. And everybody got real nervous. Now, there was nobody ever saw anything inappropriate. Nobody ever, but you know what some of the consistory or some of the people in the pews and did? They reported to the consistory members. The consistory members reported to the pastor. Now, the consistory and the pastor were on the alert and were watching for anything inappropriate. Now, nothing was ever taken beyond that because there was nothing ever seen. None of the kids ever reported any problems. None of the kids ever said anything inappropriate. The person was never left in, and that's the other thing. In that particular church, we never left that person alone with kids. We were just, because we were alerted to it. So instead of covering it up and saying it didn't occur, we paid attention. We truly paid attention. So just reporting it doesn't mean that you're going to get the person arrested and thrown in jail. It means that you're going to bring it to the attention of the authorities so that can be watched. In this situation, it was verifiable incidents that were going on. People saw things. We never saw anything. People just felt really uncomfortable. Well, again, that's a situational, if somebody has autism or the child is too young, in those situations, if you have somebody you suspect, then you don't put them in the position to be with those children. If a child can't report it themselves, then you ask the children around, did you ever see anything ever happen? A lot of times, even with autistic children and children who can't verbalize, they can still point. Did anybody touch you with a doll? They use a doll. Did anybody touch you here? Or where did he touch you? And they point. Okay, sometimes children can understand, they just may not be able to verbalize it or whatever. Or the other thing is getting them to a doctor. If you get them to a doctor, if you truly suspect that something has happened, then they can actually take it to the doctor and actually see if penetration occurred, so that child can be protected. But there again, you would have to have had a situation where maybe you walked in on something and not necessarily saw anything happening, but maybe they were redressing the child all of a sudden. Like, why were you redressing the child? Oh well, they had a dirty diaper, or well, I was just checking to see if they had a dirty diaper. Why would you do that? It's not appropriate. So at that point, something weird has happened that is inappropriate, and at that point, you'd have the parents get the child to the doctor, have them check to make sure there was no penetration. That person then becomes red flag or a high profile person that you would keep an eye on and would not allow with children again until everything was cleared. It could have been truly that's what they were doing, and it could have been that the person, the child had a lot of gas or whatever, and they thought they did mess themselves, so the adult checked, and it might have been a very innocent thing, but you still don't just brush under the carpet, even if the child cannot talk. The other thing is teaching kids good self-esteem. If kids are beat at home, okay, because they did something bad, then what happens? They think they deserved it. They're told over and over again, you're lazy. You're a good for nothing. And this is one of the biggest problems that plague adults today, is the self-esteem issue. Kids who are not nurtured as children, kids who are bullied, kids who our parents think that the best punishment was to guilt the hell out of you and tell you how, if you better straighten up, because if you don't straighten up, you're never going to be anything in this world. You're going to be nothing but a lazy old, bum. You need to pick up your room. You need to do this. You need to help around the house. You need to take out the garbage and do the chores because you're just lazy. Well, you tell the kid that long enough, they believe it. And now when they step out of bounds and you backhand them, they believe that they deserved it. And now the child grows up into an adult and now has low self-esteem. If you have low self-esteem, what is the easiest way to make yourself feel better? Bingo! Treat other people like crap. You make other people feel bad or lower than you so that you feel better. And this is one of the things, now what are you doing? You're just now perpetuating, especially if you do it to a child. So now you're doing the whole thing over again. And you're perpetuating this constant circle. Teaching children good self-esteem is critical these days. Critical to bringing up good self-centered children. And I don't mean self-centered meaning that, I mean their self, their ego, their identity is well-centered, well-balanced. They know who they are, and they know how to treat other people properly. So, a lot of times kids too often are afraid to say anything because parents don't what? They don't believe what Uncle Joe would never do that to you. How dare you say something about your uncle like that? My goodness gracious, he's a police officer in this town, and he is one of the nicest men around. And that's just terrible that you would say something like that. Well, there goes. So much for the sexual abuse. Kids don't, again, good. So you listen to what your children say. Or like I said, if they've been told they've been bad for years, then that's what happens. One of the things that John Henning told us from the biggest problem that they have at Bethany is that they bring these kids in, they teach them, they give them good self-esteem, they build them up, and they feel good about themselves, they're doing well in school, and where do they have to send them? Home. In the same environment they just came from that created this issue in the first place. The next real important thing after teaching the kids is who? Teaching the adults. That's right, teaching the adults. The teachers, the school teachers, the coaches, the counselors, the Sunday school teachers, the church officials, the ministers, the priests, and especially the parents. The parents as well as the general public. What to look for, how to help your kids verbalize this or speak about this, how to report it, and especially how to create a safe environment. And that's one of the things that we don't do. We don't do safe environments, and we need to. And that's one of the big things. Churches figure, hey, if you're a Christian, right, you're righteous. You're a good person. So we shouldn't have to watch over you. Biggest mistake churches make. Schools, same thing. And now with all this stuff coming up, with all of the school teachers and things like that, now they are really paying a lot closer attention. Making classrooms, shower rooms, locker rooms, offices, very careful, make them very safe environments. Making sure that there's not a hostile environment for Muslims, for LGBT, for students who are being bullied because they're skinny, or they're overweight, or they walk funny, or they look funny, or they wear glasses. What? Or they're smart. Yeah, smart. Just because you're intelligent. They get ridiculed. So, how to create this safe environment is really important in schools right now, and that's one of the things that schools are trying to do. And sometimes I don't think they take the bullying serious enough. And we're starting to see that the kids are actually, we're seeing increasing suicide rate because kids can't take the bullying anymore. You're seeing this tearjerker of YouTube videos of kids who are just abused, and they won't speak. They're holding signs. Have you ever seen the ones that hold the signs up? And they have the whole, and they just hold a sign up, and it's I was abused, I was bullied, because I was gay, because I was smart, because whatever, and I got locked in a room. I got so on and so forth. Yep, and different schools are even worse. I mean, we have this is very prevalent in the Allentown School District. Unfortunately, Rob is one of the more violent schools. We have a friend of ours who was a sergeant detective in the Allentown Police Department, became a DRF school teacher, ended up in the alternative school setting where he took care of the really bad kids. Of course, as a police officer, he was well versed at that. But he said it was horrible. He goes, you couldn't touch the kids, you can't touch them, and they're violent. They're literally violent. They have no respect, and again, this whole idea of abuse is just, and they're not only doing it to the teachers, they're doing it to the other students. So it becomes worse and worse and worse. Unfortunately, the law, you're right. The laws do protect, unfortunately, the laws protect them. Now, what's nice about it is they have these alternative schools. So the kids who continually do this, who are continually bullying, they can actually remove them from the general population, put them in an alternative school. So they're finally starting to catch on to these things. But background checks, child abuse clearances, these are all tools that are now being used. Continuing education updates regarding at-risk kids. Look at who Sandusky went after. He went after the kids from broken homes who are at risk, who had no self-esteem or had low self-esteem. They came, and that's who he went after. And he knew that's who I could get because he can manipulate. These kids already feel that they're the lowest of low. They're not worth anything. And that's what happens. Yes, Janet? Correct. And I just want to repeat it so the recording gets... But yes, you're absolutely right. A lot of these parents, single mothers, single dads, were excited to get these kids in the second mile. Because you're right, they got opportunities they never would have had. They're going to a prestigious university, being taught by an award-winning assistant coach, of 30 years. I mean, under Joe Paterno, getting to go to these bowl games, getting to go to these different places and being, getting presents and things that they never would have been able to get by their parents. So absolutely, as a single mom or a single dad, yes, they were ecstatic that their child was given this opportunity, not knowing that this is what was happening, behind the scenes. But here at church, churches need to be just as diligent. Churches, doors with windows. Now, we put the children's Sunday school back in here. And the only reason I allowed it was because, or even suggested it, was because there's a window. That any parent can go there and look in and watch their child and watch what's going on. There are other kids. We never let kids one-on-one with a teacher. Okay? One teacher, one student. That doesn't happen. It's a room full of kids with a teacher. It's always best to have two teachers and no solo, no solo child care providers. And that's really, we always should have two people. But when you have a group full of kids, and the other thing we do is we keep these doors open. We have adult Sunday school here, and we have children's Sunday school right in there. At any time, we can hear the kids and we can walk back and forth, and so there's always adults present and around. So, it would be nice if we could have the kids over here, but we know if we get them anywhere near the toys, Sunday school's done and over with. So, they're over there. But, again, we've done child abuse clearances on all of our Sunday school teachers. We have a policy, and the policy, we don't have our own Trinity policy, but what we use is the Penn Northeast Conference's policy. And I'll show you these in just a minute. But we also do, part of this is mission, talking about this, doing the education, mission outreach, doing the educational seminars like this one, doing support groups, classes, seminars, doing the awareness, talking openly about behaviors that seem inappropriate or just uncomfortable, doing this in a loving way without being accusing, talking to somebody and saying, look, we're really concerned because we don't want to see you get in trouble. What you're doing, what seems to be very innocent, but to some people look very inappropriate. And we don't want to see anybody accuse you wrongly. So we're letting you know that, so you come to a person in a loving manner saying, look, we understand that, this happened, may have been a very innocent act, but somebody thought it was inappropriate, so we want to make sure that we address it in a proper manner. That doesn't mean you ban the person from ever seeing kids again, but you don't put that person in this situation so they don't get into that predicament again. But in this is the Penn Northeast Conference's Safe Church Policy, and it's a mere 15 pages long. And then you have the United Church of Christ, the national office, has Making Our Churches Safe for All, and it is also it's a 25-page document that is just about making the church safe. So both the national church and even our conference, our local conference, have these documents about a safe church. And these are just really important for us. We here at Trinity use the Penn Northeast Conference's Safe Church Policy as part of our policy. We actually voted on that in consistory, and that's part of our policy. That's why we do child abuse clearances now. Absolutely, and that's why it's very important for people who are looking at doing teaching, whether it be school teachers or whether it be Sunday school teachers or church. It's very important to know what it is that is going on, these types of things, and knowing that we have certain policies, safe church policies. We have the schools obviously have child abuse clearances and so on and so forth that you go through to find this out. But the question we come back to, are we doing enough? What could we be doing? Is there more that we could be doing? How did the Sandusky scandal go on for so long? I mean, and then again it goes back to the reputation versus safety. And that's also for the church, because look what happened in the Catholic Church. It was the same thing. It was basically the same thing. Our reputation versus the safety of the kids. Penn State, unfortunately, I still believe they continue to adopt that culture where football is more important than anything else. But the Catholic Church seems to have learned. We're actually seeing the Catholic Church come forward and actually turning in their own priests for sexual abuse and removing them from the priesthood immediately and not playing any games. So it seems like the Catholic Church may have learned, but it seems like churches may have learned this. I'm not so sure about Penn State. Time will tell. I'm hoping they do. I'm hoping that we do see this. I know that they want to maintain the football program, but at the same time, I hope they're just as diligent about keeping kids safe as well. Dawn, you had a question or a comment? This goes back to what Heather was saying. What happens if the child's autistic? Well, like the respites that Dawn and I go to, one of the biggest problems is we have some kids there who are autistic who are like they can be 12, 13 years old. So they're actually going through puberty at this time. So, you have kids and who are very vulnerable. So, we have to, and then you have smaller kids as well. But you've got to take that time to make sure that, like you said, two people one stays at the door, one goes in with the child, so that, you can see what's going on, but you can also, but I mean, it's like Alyssa Lair, Brandon's wife, who's an autistic therapist. I was actually in the bathroom with her when she took care of one of the boys because I couldn't take, I didn't know what to do, and she did, and she made sure he got changed, got his diapers on, got him cleaned up, and was very professional about it, and so on and so forth. But there was two people there to make sure nothing happened, and even though she's a professional, But yes, and those are very important aspects. Is we don't even at the autism center, we don't put ourselves in those predicaments, in those situations where someone could say, "What were you doing in there by yourself with a kid? Going to the bathroom." Mm-hmm. Yes. The nurse is always there. Yep, and that's important. So, again, we always have to be asked, are we doing enough? What more could we do? And we want to make sure we don't allow things to go as far as it did in either here or even in the Catholic Church scandal. We've got to make sure that we take care of those things. None of us know just how much Joe Paterno truly knew. We really don't know how much he really hid. Right, and the thing is, we all make mistakes. And to watch a man who was the winningest coach in football have his titles all stripped away, all the good, all the millions of dollars that he's donated, all the goodwill that he's done, has all been wiped away by one awe. It's the old thing of, 100 attaboys can be wiped away by one awe, and that's exactly what happened. So it's unfortunate. Right. And that'll be a debate that'll be going on for many, many years. So, it's an unfortunate situation, but, we don't know the full story, and I'm sure as time goes on, more and more will come out participating with that. But now, let us go to prayer. God of great love, help us to open our hearts to your love and soften our closed minds. Help us to move beyond the mire we find ourselves in by breathing deeply of your Spirit and reaching to our highest selves in you. Enable us to delight in the laughter of a child, the beauty of a sunset, the scent of a rose, and thus see the glory of your world. We ask these things in the name of the one who knew hatred and loves still, Jesus the Christ. Amen.